Have you ever felt a subtle, maybe undeniable link to the world around you? Something beyond what your everyday senses perceive?
Hmm.
What if the very fabric of our consciousness, our emotions, even our collective human experience, what if it isn't just contained, within our own minds,
Right.
but is deeply, intimately interwoven with something far grander, like Earth's own rhythms, maybe even the universe's fundamental forces?
The fascinating question.
Well, today we're taking a deep dive into some really interesting sources that explore exactly these surprising connections.
Yeah.
Our mission really is to unpack how these subtle electromagnetic fields, the ones surrounding us and, crucially, the ones inside us, how they might have profound implications for biology, consciousness, and, well, the very idea of human interconnectivity.
And the sources we're looking at are quite diverse.
They really are. They range from the pretty intricate world of quantum electrodynamics all the way to compelling studies on global consciousness.
It's a truly intriguing journey we're about to embark on, I think.
Yeah.
What's so captivating here is how these seemingly disparate fields, you got physics, neuroscience, even these broader concepts of human connection.
Yeah, they seem worlds apart sometimes.
Exactly. But they begin to converge. And they start suggesting a unified electromagnetic reality that, well, it profoundly shapes who we are and how we experience the world. It definitely challenges many traditional views.
Okay, so let's start unpacking that. Let's begin maybe with the brain itself. We typically picture the brain as, this complex network of neurons
The standard picture, yeah.
firing electrical signals. But what if there's an even more fundamental view, as some of our sources suggest? What if the brain is, at its core, an intrinsically electromagnetic field object, an EM field object?
That's precisely what the research points towards. If you look from the atomic level upwards, the space within and around our brains is just permeated by these electromagnetic fields.
Permeated, okay.
Yeah. And while other forces exist, gravity, for instance,
Yeah.
they are functionally inert at this microscopic scale, billions of times weaker, really, than the EM forces governing all those interactions between atoms and molecules that actually make up our brains.
So our material basis, then, the atomic nuclei, the electrons,
Yeah.
it's all defined by these electromagnetic properties, their charge, their magnetic moment.
Fundamentally, yes. Which brings up a pretty profound question. If the brain is fundamentally an EM field entity,
Right.
could consciousness itself be an expression of these very fields?
Wow.
Some researchers are actually proposing something called electromagnetic correlates of consciousness, or EMCC.
AMCC.
Yeah. And the idea sort of suggests that maybe all the theories of consciousness we have, in essence, might just be describing a specific subset of the brain's incredibly rich electromagnetic field expression.
So these EM fields aren't just some incidental byproduct of brain activity, like exhaust fumes from an engine.
No, not at all. That's a key point.
Yeah.
They seem to originate at an incredibly tiny scale, the nanometer scale, from the actions of neuronal membranes and also glial cell membranes.
The support cells.
Exactly, the support cells. And these actions shape both the static and the dynamic electric and magnetic fields that literally pervade the entire brain
Pervade the whole thing.
and even extend beyond it. It's almost as if the brain's detailed ultrastructure is, vividly reflected in these pervasive energetic fields.
Okay, so we have these intrinsically electromagnetic brains. That's a big idea right there. But here's where it gets, for me, truly fascinating. How do our internal fields then interact with something as huge as Earth's own massive electromagnetic environment?
Yeah, the connection point.
Our sources, they seem to reveal some compelling synchronizations here.
They really do. We're seeing studies showing significant correlations between human physiological rhythms, things like our brainwave activity, EEG,
Right, the EEG patterns.
and even our cardiovascular patterns, our heart rhythms, correlations between those and fluctuations in solar and geomagnetic activity. It points to a very direct coupling, almost like we're, hardwired into the planet's pulse.
So you're saying the Earth literally has a kind of heartbeat that we might be tuning into. Is that pushing it too far?
Honestly, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Consider the Schumann resonances.
Okay, Schumann resonance.
These are natural resonant frequencies of the Earth ionosphere cavity. Think of it like the space between the Earth's surface and the charged layer of the upper atmosphere, acting like a giant global tuning fork.
A cavity resonator.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And their fundamental frequency, it's around 7 to 8 hertz. which is remarkable because it overlaps bang on with key human brain rhythms.
Like alpha waves.
Precisely, theta and alpha activity. And what's more, the amplitudes, the strength of the electric and magnetic fields in our own brain activity, they're similar in magnitude to these Schumann resonances. It really suggests an ongoing information transfer.
That is a profound connection. It really is. And it's not just the brain involved here, is it? I was surprised to read that the heart actually generates the largest rhythmic electromagnetic field in the body.
That's right. It's huge in comparison, approximately 100 times stronger than the brain's field.
100 times.
And it's detectable several feet away, even down the nanotesla range, which is incredibly subtle but measurable.
Wow. So what does that heart field do?
Well, the rhythmic patterns in our heart rate variability, the beat-to-beat changes,
Which reflect emotions, right?
directly tied to our emotional states, yes.
Yeah.
Those patterns actually encode and transmit biologically relevant information via this electromagnetic field radiated by the heart.
So hang on, our emotional state isn't just internal, it's broadcast.
Quite literally broadcast. Whether we realize it or not, it's out there.
That's a powerful idea. I mean, it really makes you stop and think, doesn't it? If our emotions are broadcast, what does that mean for how we interact, how we affect each other?
The implications are significant.
And how sensitive are we biologically to these fields? Our sources show it's not just about strength, right? It's about specific frequencies or patterns, even in really weak fields.
Exactly. It's not always about intensity. There seem to be specific windows of activity.
Like that study on rat seizures.
Precisely. Their seizure activity increased when they were exposed to experimentally applied magnetic fields that mimicked geomagnetic activity. But, and this is the crucial part, only with specific precision. At 5 nanotesla variations, they saw the effect.
But not lower or higher.
Right. Not at 1 or 2 nanotesla, and not in much higher levels like 10, 20, 50, even 500 nanotesla. That specificity really suggests a kind of resonance or tuning effect. It's not just a simple dose-response curve.
A biological tuning fork, almost.
In a way, yes. And this interaction goes even deeper. It seems our DNA itself might function as a kind of fractal antenna in electromagnetic fields.
A fractal antenna. Explain that.
Well, a fractal pattern repeats itself at different scales, right? So the self-similar structure of DNA seems to allow it to interact with EMFs across a surprisingly wide range of frequencies, from extremely low frequency, ELF, all the way up to radio frequency, RF ranges.
And this interaction isn't necessarily benign.
It seems not always. It can apparently lead to cellular stress responses and even DNA strand breaks, which indicates our cells perceive these fields at some level as potentially harmful.
So EMFs, including the ones just in our environment, they could literally be affecting our genetic material, and maybe over long periods even influencing evolution.
That's the question some researchers are asking. Some sources we look at did suggest correlations, for instance, between the rise of electrification in our world and increases in certain diseases.
Correlations, not necessarily causation, we should stress.
Absolutely. Correlation is key here. And also things like reports of reduced sperm counts possibly linked to cell phone use. These are correlations noted in the source material, raising important questions for further study.
Okay, so we've got individual brains and bodies as EM objects interacting with Earth's fields. Now let's try and connect this to a truly global scale. Our sources propose that billions of human brains, all immersed within this shared geomagnetic field,
Right, this collective immersion.
might create something some call an induced transcerebral field.
It's a fascinating hypothesis. This induced field, they estimate it to be around 83 to 97 picotesla for current global populations.
Which sounds tiny, picotesla.
It is tiny. But what's remarkable is that it's surprisingly similar in strength to the magnetic fields generated by processes within an individual human brain. Those range from about 60 to 125 picotesla.
So the collective field strength is in the same ballpark as an individual's.
Roughly, yes. And if you connect this to the bigger picture, it suggests conditions for a kind of hologram,
A hologram.
where information about the whole field might be represented somehow within each individual unit, and maybe vice versa. The part contains the whole.
It's almost like thinking of the Earth's magnetic field as a vast cosmic hard drive.
That's one analogy used. Our sources actually state it has enough potential energy to theoretically store the electromagnetic information generated by the action potentials, the electrical impulses of every single human brain that has ever existed.
Every human brain ever. That's
Yeah.
staggering.
It is. And it leads to another fascinating question. What would be the latency? How fast could information travel between all these brains within this shared field?
Right, the connection speed.
Calculations based on magnetic diffusivity, basically, how quickly a magnetic field spreads through a medium, suggest that a critical change in one person's brain
Yeah.
could theoretically diffuse through all other brains in this induced field in just minutes.
Minutes, not days or years.
Minutes, maybe 2.4 to 2.8 minutes if you model it like physiological saline, or perhaps 8 to 9 minutes for average tissue conductance.
And those time spans.
They actually overlap with key biological processes, things like dreaming, memory consolidation. It makes the idea even more intriguing, doesn't it?
It really does. And this leads us to this other concept mentioned in the sources, excess correlations, which sounds a bit like quantum entanglement, but on a biological scale.
It has similarities, yes. It points to connections that seem to defy our standard understanding of separation in space. There were experiments mentioned.
A water experiment.
That's the one. Injecting small amounts of protons into one volume of spring water apparently caused a small increase in alkalinity, a pH change in another volume of water.
Even when they were separated.
Even when separated by up to 10 kilometers.
10 kilometers? How?
Well, that's the mystery. It points towards non-local information transfer. And this concept is further supported by something called the Cossack resonant recognition model.
Okay, what's that?
This model basically suggests that proteins and DNA don't just function chemically. They communicate and interact through highly specific electromagnetic resonances, like tiny tuning forks vibrating at specific frequencies.
So molecules talking to each other with EM signals.
Essentially, yes. It suggests particular photon wavelengths, light particles can act as templates and initiators for molecular pathways. This kind of mechanism could create the conditions needed for these excess correlations and potential non-locality within the human environment. It hints at this web of subtle, maybe instantaneous communication.
So this isn't just like theoretical musing anymore. There seems to be a growing body of actual evidence supporting the idea of a global, interconnected consciousness.
Yes, quite a lot when you start putting the pieces together. There are historical studies, for example, Alexander Trojewski's analysis back from the 18th to the early 20th century.
What did he find?
He found that about 80% of major historical events, things like wars, social revolutions, correlated significantly with peaks in solar activity and the resulting geomagnetic fluctuations.
Wow, 80%.
A very high correlation. And more recently, there are studies on things like mass meditations. One often cited took place in Washington, D.C. in 1993.
What happened there?
Around 2,500 people meditated together with the intention of reducing crime. And during that period, the crime rate reportedly dropped by 25%, suggesting perhaps that a focused small group can influence a larger population.
A measurable effect. And then there's the Global Consciousness Project, the GCP.
Right, the network of random number generators, RNGs.
These machines are designed to produce pure randomness, right?
Exactly. But the GCP network consistently shows deviations from randomness, tiny but statistically significant patterns during global events that evoke widespread human emotional response.
Like 9/11.
Like 9/11, yes. That was a very strong signal. And what's particularly striking is that these effects seem to be even stronger during events characterized by widespread, deep compassion.
Compassion amplifies the effect.
It appears so, according to their data. The core hypothesis emerging from all this
Tying it together.
is that Earth's magnetic field might act as a carrier medium for biologically relevant information. This information, the thinking goes, is encoded by physiologically patterned signals from people, especially when they're in what's called heart-coherent states.
That state of calm, positive emotion.
Exactly, when the heart's beating in a very harmonious, organized way. The hypothesis suggests this coherent information then gets distributed, possibly non-locally, to all living beings connected via the field.
Which implies a potential feedback loop.
A powerful one, where intentionally created coherent fields stemming from collective human states like focused meditation or shared compassion could actually positively influence the collective consciousness.
This whole exploration, it just keeps pointing back to the fundamental physics, doesn't it? Especially quantum electrodynamics, QED, for understanding these light-matter interactions at the deepest level.
It really does. QED is arguably the most successful physical theory we have. It's the quantum field theory that explains how light and matter interact, fundamentally.
And it describes everything from tiny shifts in hydrogen atoms
Lamb shift, yeah.
to how an atom's environment can just dramatically change its behavior.
Absolutely. Think about the Purcell effect. It shows that simply changing an atom's electromagnetic surroundings Putting it in a cavity, for instance, can actually tune how quickly it spontaneously decays, how it emits light.
So the environment isn't passive.
Not at all. Or consider the Casimir-Polder force. This is where virtual photons, popping in and out of existence in the quantum vacuum,
The quantum
they actually modify the energy levels of atoms when those atoms are near surfaces.
No.
It highlights this constant, inescapable interaction between matter and the quantum field.
And these quantum interactions, they're not just abstract physics calculations. They play out in complex biological processes too, right?
Oh, definitely. Take resonance energy transfer, RET. We mentioned resonance earlier.
Like the tuning forks.
Exactly. Energy gets transferred between molecules, sometimes over surprising distances, without direct contact. It's mediated by photons. This is crucial for things like photosynthesis, how plants capture light energy, and even how some proteins function.
And are there less positive examples?
Well, yes. There's a related process called interatomic coulombic decay, or ICD.
ICD.
Here, one atom can essentially ionize a neighbor, knock an electron off it by exchanging a virtual photon. This is particularly relevant in radiation biology.
Why is that?
Because ICD can produce a shower of low-energy free electrons, and these electrons are known to be particularly effective at damaging DNA.
So quantum effects directly linked to potential biological harm.
In that context, yes.
So where does all this leave us? What does it mean for the future? We're seeing these new fields emerge, like polaritonic chemistry.
That's a fascinating one. Scientists are using strong coupling between light and matter, usually inside tiny optical resonators, to actually change the rate and even the pathway of chemical reactions.
So literally controlling chemistry with light in new ways.
It's almost like learning to tune chemical reactivity using these light-matter hybrid states, these polaritons. It's a very active area.
And on the theoretical side,
There's a huge effort toward something called Quantum Electrodynamical Density Functional Theory, or QEDFT.
okay, that's a mouthful.
It is. But the goal is incredibly ambitious, to unify quantum optics, the study of light, with density functional theory, which is a workhorse for understanding complex molecules and materials.
Bringing it all together.
Trying to create a single, consistent framework to describe these intricate light-matter interactions across all sorts of energy scales. This kind of theory is really essential if we want to deeply understand the brain's electromagnetic nature.
And this brings us right back full circle to that huge challenge in consciousness science, the explanatory gap,
The hard problem.
the hard problem. How do physical processes give rise to subjective experience? If the brain is fundamentally an EM field object, and if consciousness is intricately tied to these fields, well then physics, QED, it really tells us where to look, doesn't it?
It provides the physical substrate, the arena.
But the ultimate, really mind-bending question, it still remains, what is it like to be electromagnetic fields?
That we still don't know.
What an incredible journey we've taken today, really exploring this profound interconnectedness of life, consciousness, and the very fabric of our planet.
It's really mind-expanding stuff.
From the subtle dance of photons deep within our brains, these quantum effects, all the way out to the vast encompassing rhythms of Earth's magnetic field, the threads, they seem undeniable. They're weaving us all into some kind of grander tapestry.
And the convergence of these scientific disciplines, physics, biology, neuroscience, consciousness studies, it's really pushing the boundaries of our understanding, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's inviting us, maybe even forcing us, to consider that consciousness might be a far more expansive, more interactive phenomenon than we ever imagined.
Yeah.
The research we've dug into today really suggests that we're not just isolated islands of awareness. We seem to be part of a grand, dynamic electromagnetic system, constantly exchanging information, subtly, with our environment and perhaps with each other.
It really leaves you wondering, doesn't it? I mean, if our emotions, our intentions can subtly shape this global electromagnetic field, this field that potentially connects us all, what responsibility does that give us as individuals and, as a collective species? And what other possibilities might unfold as we learn to consciously engage with this unseen, interconnected reality?
The implications feel vast. They could extend from our own personal well-being and health right out to collective human flourishing, how we approach global problems.
It prompts some big questions.
It really does. It prompts us to consider, how might understanding our fundamental electromagnetic nature actually shift our approach? Our approach to global challenges, our personal choices, and maybe ultimately our very sense of place in the universe.